numeracy big picture, as well as specifically from the projects that we've implemented. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have seen some than other stuff. But a large-scale longitudinal study was done by Greg Duncan and some of his colleagues out of Northwestern University, where they were looking at predictors of later school success. So they looked at kids in K, 3, and 5. And they found that math, in addition to literacy and social relational skills or executive function skills, were 3 of the strongest predictors of later school success. But they saw that math was an even stronger predictor of later school success than literacy even. And that research has been very compelling in the world of early learning, particularly because math is kind of seen as this skill that is not really addressed as strongly or vehemently, particularly in development, because we need to get kids reading. But there are huge implications for how children do in math in the very early years. And then there's some research that was done that kind of backs that up a little bit more strongly than in the past. Literacy Boost, how many of you have heard of Literacy Boost? Or know what Literacy Boost is? Okay, a few people. Yeah, so Literacy Boost is Save the Children's literacy intervention for teachers, community, and students. So it's a set of, it's an approach to teach teachers how to teach kids to read. When we started out doing Literacy Boost in a couple of our early countries, Malawi and Nepal, specifically for this example, the students took a literacy assessment and a numeracy assessment, but the teachers were only given the literacy intervention, the trainings, the support, the community stuff. But the assessments showed gains in both the literacy and the numeracy of the students. So that made us really want to investigate numeracy by itself to see what if we actually did an intervention that just focused on developing the math skills of teachers, what kind of benefits would children and families and teachers start to see if we actually focused in on the math. Math isn't something that we need in the classroom, on a test, just to memorize formulas. It's a really relevant part of our everyday lives, particularly having that strong foundation in the early grades when you're young, to be able to compute with fluency, to be able to estimate, to be able to do all sorts of things that we don't even think about now because it's so second nature to us, but it's something that it's a skill that we need to function. So when we began thinking about putting this intervention together, we had some big philosophical type questions. And one of the things we were thinking about is, can you teach teachers to teach math? Is it possible to train teachers to teach math and to do it well, particularly in the resource-constrained communities, countries that we work in? And then as a follow-up to that, can we develop a single math toolkit that could be implemented in Bolivia, that could be implemented in Pakistan, that could be implemented in Indonesia? Is there something universal about what we could create that could, with adaptation, modification, work in a variety of different settings? And then 5 rupees, can I get XYZ with it? So it's very contextualized and relevant to kids' lives in those countries. The student assessment that we do collects some home background information. So how many people in the family, who have you seen reading to you in the past? Do you help people in your family with chores? What kind of chores do you help them with? It gives us a little bit more, some more layers of information on what we can kind of gather from the background of the children. There's both timed sections, so timed addition, timed subtraction, and then there's just untimed sections where we want to know what kids know. The tests are administered one-to-one. So in children's home language, we had a very interesting discussion over lunch about language of instruction versus home language. And we don't want to want to have language issues get in the way of children's understanding. So if they speak whatever language they speak at home and that's not the language of instruction, we'll test them in that language because we want to know what they know. And recently, which is very exciting news, all of our assessments have been electronic using software that RTI has developed called the Tangerine software. Some of you are nodding your heads, and it just makes data a lot more reliable, a lot more efficient, and we can just get results faster than paper and pencil typing into the computer. So yay tablets and technology. Okay, so before I share some data, I just wanted to say what are some of the, I don't want to say trends, but what are some of the things that we're hearing and thinking about when we've been implementing in the field. And Numeracy Boost is in Bangladesh, Malawi, Pakistan, Egypt, Ethiopia, and will hopefully soon be in Liberia and in Thailand in a refugee camp setting. So we've got a good variety of places that we've implemented. By and large, we hear a lot about this fear of mathematics on the part of the teacher, as well as on the part of students. Across these countries, there's just a very kind of punitive environment. You know, children say that they don't want to come to class because they don't know the answer to their times table and their teacher's going to whack them on the head. It's sad, but it's true. There's a huge focus on getting the right answer. So getting an answer just so that the teacher can say, very good, 6 + 3 is 9, let's move on, not talking about how else can you make 9? Is 5 + 4 9? Is 10 take away 1 9? So it's very much on sort of rote memorization, getting the right answer. And the curriculum is very heavy. You know, in a lot of the countries, they're expected to know a lot at a very young age. And then there's huge leaps in curriculum that are expected when children go on, particularly between 2nd and 3rd grade, where a lot of dropout also happens. So it's, the environment has some limitations. And then what we're wanting to see is a tall order under the best circumstances. In this country, teachers are afraid to teach math. We have a lot of issues getting math taught properly or adequately in a very well-resourced, high-functioning country. So in countries where teacher training is limited, where teacher support is limited, where resources are limited, it becomes even harder. And we're asking teachers to change practice. I don't know how many of you have taught, but teachers don't like to change the way they teach, right? They teach the way that they've been taught, they teach the way they're comfortable with, and we're really asking teachers to go outside of that and do a lot of things that they've never done before. You know, using materials, no way. The only material in the classroom is a piece of chalk. Maybe if the kids are lucky, they have textbooks and the teacher has a textbook, right? We're trying to change that by advocating for more materials. Doing group work is hard. As a 4th grade teacher, I hated doing group work because you have 36 kids in the class, you need to put them into groups, you need to give each group a task, you have to differentiate that task. And I'm a trained teacher, and so you can imagine how much harder it becomes in an environment where you don't have any of that. But I think the thing that's the most critical is to develop that confidence in teachers, to teach math in a way that they feel comfortable, that they have confidence in that subject matter, they know how to explain things. We had a lot of teachers say that in our trainings that they didn't understand the conceptual understanding of borrowing and carrying until they attended the training. Because to them it was a formula. It was an algorithm that they were told to solve, and so they did it. They followed the steps, they figured it out, and you know, they made it. But now, after seeing what that one really is and working with popsicle sticks and, you know, talking about place value, it became a lot clearer to them. So we're really hoping that the confidence in the subject matter, the clarity in the concepts is deepened through this process. And that's going to take a lot of time. We always tell our country offices that want to implement literacy or numeracy boost that you can't expect things to happen in a year, in a school year, which probably is just 7 months of an intervention after you do the assessment and you take out time for holidays and all of that. You really need to put some effort and time into it, maybe 3 years, maybe 4, maybe more. So it's not something that's going to change over time, or overnight, sorry, but over time it will. One of the things that's the weakest about the work that we do is the demo and the modeling. So having model teachers to look to say, that teacher really delivered a great math lesson, I'm going to do what she did, or I'm going to go and ask her for help. I think a lot of teachers here really rely a lot on the teacher next door to you to help you with some of the things that you struggle with. We need to get better at doing that as Save the Children and just in the countries that we work in. And we're also trying to collect a lot more qualitative research. We're great on the quantitative side, and we're getting better at the qualitative side. We need to know how teachers are feeling about the intervention, what they're doing, what their constraints are, what they find really hard about group work, what isn't working for them. And we're trying to collect more of this, and hopefully we'll have a lot more than we do now. Okay, so the 2 countries that I'm going to share a little bit of data from are Quetta in Balochistan province, which is in the southern western part of the country. It touches Afghanistan and Iran. Is someone from Balochistan here? I see some. Okay, so you can tell us more about Balochistan if you want. And in Meherpur, which is in the Khulna division of Bangladesh, it's, now my geography is challenged, but it's north, central, eastern, but don't quote me on that. And both of the projects, well, I'll show you some of the results. Both of the projects were grade 2 children. In Pakistan, numeracy boost was implemented in 18 schools, but it was part of a larger project that's funded by the Dutch government. It's called the Balochistan Education Program, and all of the 233 schools in that program received support from Save the Children, infrastructure support, trainings for school management committees, training for head teachers, but the numeracy and literacy component trainings were only provided to 18 schools. You can see some background information about our sample, that half of them were female. They were 9 years old on average. 88% of them attended Kachi. Is anybody familiar with Kachi classes? They're kind of the kindergarten class that happens in the public school setting, sort of a transitional grade. 69% of them do chores, and the majority of them who do chores are girls. 64% report studying between 1 to 2 hours a day. 18% don't study at all, and 18% do so more than 2 hours a day. This is children self-reporting on this, so we don't go in and ask their parents, and study is a loose and wide term in the mind of a 7-year-old or 9-year-old, so, but that is one of the questions that we wanted to get their opinion or feedback on. 95% report having no books at home. That's just a little bit about the sample. The Balochistan program in Pakistan had the highest scores of all of our programs so far. At baseline, you can see both numeracy boost and control students started off about the same. This is average score on the assessment. There's 14 sections on the assessment, and each section has 1 or more than 1 question. So on average, the gain that the numeracy boost students made, 25%, and that's statistically significant, whereas the control school students' gain at the end line was only 5%. And this is across all of the questions on the test. This is just drilling down a little deeper into one of the domain areas, number sense. So in skip counting, again, numeracy boost student gain, control school gain. Quantity discrimination, so when you have a bunch of different numbers, you say which one's bigger. Numeracy boost had a 32% gain and the control had 9%. And then missing numbers, when you see a line of numbers and you have to tell which one's missing in the middle, 36% gain versus a 12% gain in end line. These are very, very high scores. This was one of our best samples. And we have some very interesting data regarding language, which I'll get into in a minute. But and I would say that these are some of the higher order skills. So skip counting is a skill that's relatively challenging compared to just counting numbers. So is quantity discrimination and missing numbers. So in some of the more challenging subtasks, these students did very well. in comparison, well, in general and also in comparison to the control group. Bangladesh, the sample in Bangladesh was a little bit different. We had some schools that had that only got the numeracy boost intervention. We had some schools that had both numeracy and literacy boost, because that's one of the things that we're trying to look at is an added intervention and added impact on student learning. The sample again was grade 2, 9 years old. They speak the national language, which is Bangla. 60% of them attended an ECD program, and 95% of them do chores, some kind of chores, and on average they're studying 3 hours a day. So the Bangladesh results weren't as strong, I would say, in terms of the difference between the control and the intervention schools. They had very good scores, but the difference between the control and intervention were not as strong as the Pakistan scores, as you can see. And we have some speculations about why that might be, which include the control schools having received a lot of interventions from Save the Children. Sorry, I should have said the Bangladesh program is funded by our sponsorship funding, which is not related to any donors, it's not related to any government, it's individual child sponsorship. So you give us some money because you want to sponsor a child somewhere, and we put it into programming that we think we want to support. And so this area has been, I guess we've been working in this area for over 10 years, and we've been supporting these schools in early childhood and school health and nutrition in a lot of different areas. So we feel like these schools are comparable in some ways because of the supports that we've been providing to them. One of the reasons why we think the gains here weren't as high. Measurement and geometry subtests. Some of the skills showed significance compared to the control group. Days of the week, shapes, but the other skills were pretty similar in terms of the significance. Oops. And I'm coming towards the end here, and we can open it up for questions. Some of the findings from this data that we thought were interesting that we want to look at more is that in Bangladesh, the kids who participated in Literacy Boost and Numeracy Boost had higher gains than the kids who only had the Numeracy Boost intervention. So this is something that's obviously very important programmatically for programs that want to implement an intervention. Can they, somehow manage to do a literacy intervention and a numeracy intervention? Financially, is it feasible for them? Human resources-wise, is it feasible for them? Because from this one very small study, we do see that there are added gains for children who have both the intervention rather than just one. A lot of our home background information that we collected showed that students who attended the community activities, so the math camps or the story time or borrowing books, they had higher gains on the subtest than kids who didn't. And similarly, in Pakistan, we found that parents who had this environment in their homes where they either had a reading corner or they had more print material or they had more books in the home, where the family was very supportive of children attending the camps and they themselves went to the parent sessions, those children had higher gains than children whose environment looked different. One of the interesting things that we found is that both in Pakistan and Bangladesh, in Literacy Boost, girls outperformed boys on average, but can you guess in math? Boys outperformed girls in numeracy, both in Bangladesh and Pakistan. So we're thinking that there might be some kind of gender bias. I don't really like talking about gender bias because I think that, anyway, I won't go into that, but it's another topic, another day. But there are gender norms in this country and every country that you can go to. We found that girls are asked to do very different types of chores than boys. Boys are sent to the market. Boys go sell things in the market with their fathers. Boys help with farming. Girls take care of children. Girls cook. So the type of work that girls are expected to do versus boys has an impact on the types of things that they're seen they're capable of doing. So there's a lot of discussion in the country level about, oh, boys are better at math than girls are. And these are some of the things that we're trying to maybe change perceptions on and change, increase knowledge on, that there's no gender determinant for being good in one area versus another. It's really about what you expect out of your children equally. So we want to do some more work in that area, but it's an area that we're looking at. Some of the other things that we're thinking about is, are there certain skills that are linked? So for example, if there's some kids who are really good at counting and can do that one-to-one correspondence where you give them a bunch of beans and you ask them to count them out one by one, they're really good at that. Does that mean that they're also going to be really good at addition or subtraction? Are there skills that kind of go together? So if we really focus on this one area, can that show improvement in another area? And we're trying to use our research to guide us in that. We also want to know more about teachers, like I said, qualitative information. How are teachers doing? What areas are they struggling in? What areas do they need more support in? Who are the really stellar teachers? Are there teachers that are really using the math games in the classroom that other teachers can learn from? So we want to find out more about our teachers and what they're like. In Pakistan, Balochistan has many different language groups. There's Urdu, which is the language of instruction. There's Pashto, there's Persian or Farsi, there's Brahavi. And in this, again, very small sample of research that we collected, we saw that the children who spoke Farsi or Persian had much higher learning gains than the children who spoke other languages. We're not sure all the reasons why. We have some speculations, but we want to learn a little bit more about language and what does language have to do with math learning? Obviously, it has a lot to do with learning different concepts, but what exactly is it that conferred that additional learning gain on that group versus others? And then finally, we've done a lot of work on equity and literacy. Literacy Boost has been around a lot longer, and so we've done a lot of in-depth research into who struggles, who are the children who continue to struggle, what groups are marginalized most, and we want to get better at that in the math work as well. In our literacy work, we're seeing a lot of U-curves in our data these days, where we have a good number of kids who are on the mastery side, but we have a good number of kids who are really struggling with the basics, and we want to try and dig down deeper into the data for math as well and see who are the kids that are struggling and where are they struggling. And so that will be Numeracy Boost 2.0. And that's it for me, so thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. We're going to open up the floor for questions, and I think Mary, that's the first question.
Okay, so thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. So my question is, in your experience, have there been efforts to integrate math and the arts? So you showed picture books, but other forms of arts to teach math to students?
With Save the Children, you mean? We have a project called the HEART Project. I don't know if you're familiar with HEART. HEART is healing and education through the arts, and it is mostly focused on, I want to say, areas of emergency, refugee camps, places where kids have gone through some disaster. I don't think that they have a particular math focus, but they do use the arts to help children express themselves, especially if they've gone through trauma. But we haven't used the arts necessarily for math. If you have some ideas, I'd love to talk to you more about it, because I think there's a lot of different modalities to learn, and the more modalities, the better.
Other question? Lisa and Olivia.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering, so with all the countries that took part in the Numeracy Boost, was it only second grade that was targeted, or you targeted the early years? And if you did target the early years, does that have any relationships to do with your performance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have actually a separate intervention called Emergent Literacy in Math for our preschool age group. So the 3 to 6 age group gets a very similar approach to Numeracy Boost, but it's focused to their age range. So the concepts are very much similar, and they build on what happens in K1 and 2, but the content is a little bit different. And in Ethiopia, one of the research designs for that project was exactly to see what you said. Kids who have an ELM background and also get Numeracy Boost, how do they do relative to the general population? How do they do compared to kids who just get Numeracy Boost? Because we are interested to see what kind of, is there any double up effect of an early intervention on top of a primary grades intervention? And the government is actually very interested to see that too, because they want to know, or we want to use that as advocacy for early childhood education. There is some research in the US that talks about the importance of starting early and what benefits that conveys later on, but there's not a lot of international research on that. So if you're some panels that talk about our work on emergent literacy and
So your data shows that there's a lot of improvement after the intervention. So I imagine this is a new program, but how, maybe in other countries, how has your experience been with kind of measuring the improvement across time? Because it's like, it is, I mean, sometimes you expect like, okay, after this intervention, the scores go up,
Right.
you know, when they're in second, third grade, but like what happens when they go to high school, for example?
Yeah.
Or like how, I mean, I know that's very hard to measure.
Yeah.
How do you?
That's a great question. So one of the great things about sponsorship funding, which is our flexible open funding that's not tied to any kind of government mandate or any donor, is the ability to do more research or longitudinal studies. And so one of the things that we will be doing, we haven't done it yet, is to exactly see, you know, kids who participated in the Meherpur Literacy Boost or Numeracy Boost program in grade 2, where are they at grade 8? Not only where are they, have they still stayed in school, but are they doing better than peers who didn't participate in the Numeracy or Literacy Boost program? Longitudinal studies are very expensive. They take a lot of time. And in a mobile population, we have not a lot of attrition, but we do get attrition at the end of the year. Kids move, kids drop out. It's hard to track groups of children, which is not to say that we don't want to do it, but it's been a challenge for a number of different reasons. But it is something that we are going to be investigating because we see the importance of saying that our intervention works beyond 2 years or 3 years. Yeah.
Are you, so before entering into a school or into a particular region, are you also looking at other assessment reports, like USER is one which is talked about a lot these days?
Yeah.
So do you look at those as well? And also when you're doing your control and treatment group, are you also looking at other factors that might be contributing to the improved results?
Yeah.
Like especially in terms of Quetta, I can think that it's a very diverse in many ways population, because you have
Yeah.
Balochi speaking people or
Yeah.
Baloch culture, and then you have Pashtuns, then you have
Yeah.
Persian speaking Afghan refugees, and you have, so it's a very
Yeah.
kind of very complex mix of
Yes.
population. So how do you
Yeah.
determine whether what you're seeing is an outcome of your intervention
Yeah.
or not something else?
So on the outcome, I can give you if you want to read the full paper that talks about all the different regression analyses that were done, the factors that were controlled for, so that socioeconomic factors are controlled for, other factors that are controlled for, and I can share all that data with you because it is important to make sure that you're not mixing things and that your intervention is because of your intervention and not because of other factors. On the USER and other data, we do look at it to inform the work that we do. I don't know if we are guided by that data, but we definitely are aware of the data that's collected by other organizations. In Pakistan also we're working with Tele-Talim, which is a social enterprise that's focused on ICT and enhancing teacher support through distance learning, and they have their own data that they collect that we collaborate with them on. So, you know, where there is a place for collaboration with us or with other groups, we're very happy to collaborate. But we do collect our own data to improve our own practice, to also inform our programs, to advocate to government, who we are liable for in in instances where we have donor funding or we have mandates to provide data to government on different things. So we do a lot of our own data collection as well, all of our own data collection on projects that we support.
Thanks for the presentation. So my question is also related to the data collection, because you mentioned that you're using the electronic devices to assess the students. So my question is what kind of data or information you actually using the electronic devices to collect, like the complete rate or past rate of the assessment or other information? And you mentioned one of the benefits of using the electronic devices is we only talk about data that is more fast and more reliable. Is any other benefits of that?
So just to be clear, the student never gets the tablet. The student is either asked a question verbally or shown a piece of paper to mark their answer in. The data entry is done on the tablet. So the software is just used to enter the data. The test or the assessment is administered traditional style. We have used tablets in the classroom in our Pakistan project that I was just talking about, where the teacher also uses the tablet to collect ongoing formative assessment data for each student, and then keeps it's like keeping it on your computer rather than writing it down on paper. So the teacher uses the tablet to collect that data, and then the program generates some reports on student learning, who's struggling, where they're struggling. But the tablets have never been given to children to use. Does that answer your question? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, like, is there like teacher like using the tablet to record the data, like, and then after program complete, they also like kind of like submit the data to you or?
Yes. Yeah, so with the Teletalim partnership, that's one of the really great things about this partnership, is that they're very data-driven. That's their whole platform, is to use data to help teachers inform their practice. And so they've helped us develop the tools to collect the data, to provide these spread charts at every monitoring period, to provide that data back to teachers. They even have a text messaging system with these groups of teachers to say, hey, you know, this kid was had a 54% and now he's improved to 79%, good job. Or they even send messages to parents in this very small impact area that we're working with them on. So in that program, we've really used ICT or technology beyond just collecting data on tablets. But by and large, in all of our electronic data collection, we're just using the tablets to input the information, and then it's sent to the cloud somewhere, and then the analysis is done by staff in different places.
Hi, I'm Minju. I'm really interested in early childhood education, particularly for refugee children.
Uh-huh.
So I was wondering what kind of interventions or strategies that Save the Children have addressing those risk factors that refugee children particularly have.
Yeah. We have a couple of different programs. We have a program in Bangladesh that's working with the Rohingya population. They're an ethnic Burmese from Myanmar. We have programs in Thailand that are working with, again, language minorities. Our programs span all the ages, from early childhood up until adolescent, and we try to provide the same interventions that we would in a non-emergency setting or a non-refugee setting, with the modifications that we have to make for the environment or that particular context. Where are some, in Pakistan we've had not a refugee setting, but there's been emergency settings after the earthquake. In Lebanon and in Palestine, we have programs there that are working with refugees and internally displaced people. So there's a lot of programming, and it always reflects the same programming that we provide generally to our general population of children.
I think there's like a toolkit for like education in emergency.
Yes.
So are those toolkits used?
The INEE toolkits, are you talking about the INEE? Yeah, we very much rely on the INEE toolkits for our education and emergency work. There's also our own materials that we use to supplement the INEE toolkit. But particularly for emergencies, we have a very close collaboration with INEE. Our director for education and emergencies is on the working group, the big working group or the cluster working group. And if you have more specific questions, I wish I knew more about that area, but I don't. But I'd be happy to tell you more about it or give you the contact information for people who are more involved on that side.
I remember I saw somewhere that the ultimate goal of numeracy boosting is incorporating your program into the national curriculum and letting the national government develop the program.
Yeah.
So I want to know why is that and how's that going?
Why is that and how's it going? It's a really hard question. How much more time do we have? Well, I mean, obviously we feel very strongly about the content. We think it's very good content. We think it's content that is replicable, that is not asking teachers to go above and beyond what they're already doing. We're just providing them with a little bit more support to help children get deeper into the content. So we believe in our content, which is why we'd like to see it replicated more. Save the Children is a donor-funded organization, right? When USAID gives us a pot of money, we take it, we put it wherever they want us to put it, and then we leave. Governments are there in that country for long term. Ultimately, we want government to be able to take up all of these wonderful initiatives, not just what we're doing, but what you guys are working on in your classroom, what other organizations are doing, because they're the duty bearers for the education or the health or whatever in their country. In Ethiopia, we've managed to work with one woreda or one district to have literacy boost implemented district-wide by the government. And that's been a huge achievement. It's very hard to get that done for a number of reasons, finances being one of the main ones, but with numeracy boost, we're not there yet. And I don't know if we will be, but we hope. We hope that governments do see the value and that they can see it as something that is not asking them to reinvent the wheel, that it's just a set of trainings that you can incorporate into your training session, just do things a little bit differently than you've been doing it.
I was just hoping if you could expand a little more on one of your last points, saying that Save the Children is interested in digging deeper as to why there's such a big separation between those strugglers and those that are reaching mastery. I mean, and if you could maybe talk about the methods that you're hoping to use, especially since the field is very much quantitative methods driven rather than qualitative. It sounds like it could be benefited from qualitative. So,
yeah, great. You have some good students in the class. They're great questions. Yeah, so we need to find out more. We don't know. We don't know whether there's factors that have to do with the home environment, whether it's factors that have to do with the classroom environment. We know that there is something happening in the classrooms that's allowing a group of students to progress, to be at grade level and maybe even mastery, and that there's a large bunch of children that are not progressing. We think that sometimes it might have to do with issues related to the home environment, that these are children that are the most deprived. I mean, we focus on the most deprived, but there's the most deprived. And that could mean a variety of different things. It could be socioeconomically deprived. It could be a language minority or religion minority. It could be kids with special needs that have not been identified. Special needs is not a topic that is addressed in a way that is functional in any of the countries that I've worked in. If it's addressed, the kid is labeled a slow learner and kind of written off as nothing you can do about him or her. We have developed a toolkit called the SNAP Pack, which gives teachers, again, very doable things that they can do in the classroom to help struggling learners. So it's just best practices in differentiating instruction. So if you think that there's a kid who's not answering questions, perhaps he can't see the board, maybe you should move him to the front. What kind of interaction do we need to increase with parents in the home of children who are really struggling? Is there something that parents or community members can do? Is it a real learning issue? How can we diagnose issues of learning? Sri Lanka is probably one of the countries that has made the most traction in this area because their government is very much wanting to support this area. They have a large group of children that have struggled with the war, with the civil unrest that's happened in that country, and they feel like a lot of them have had some negative impacts and they want to address it. So when we have the opportunity to work with governments that want to in developing and trying to test out what could be the reasons, we're on it. But we need to collect some more information, and I agree, I think qualitative data is going to help us get there with trying to understand who these struggling learners are, and then how do we help them in a more targeted way. And the super fellowships are something that we really rely on graduate students to help us do some of this data. Yeah, they are. So if you go on to do doctorate work, you might be a super fellow, and you might be investigating that for us and speaking at an event like this in a few years.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. Two things, I was smiling earlier because I wish I had Save the Children in Jamaica because my math is terrible. And secondly, a lot of the countries that you've worked in or that you've talked about today have issues with gender parity in school. And I know that I just basically want to find out what strategies or programs you have to attract more girls in school, keep them in school, and if that formal schooling is not a possibility for them, what are some of the alternative methods of educating them? Probably homeschooling, materials sent home, I don't know what you guys do.
I feel like in many countries, in Bangladesh particularly, and I can't say that we've done this, I think the government has done a lot of good work in ensuring both girls and boys are sent to school with universal primary education. Pakistan has made some very good strides too. It's always going to be a work of advocating at the community level, that boys and girls are equal, they deserve education equally. We do have some girls' education-specific projects that are really focused on getting girls into school, or if they're out of school, then supporting them in other ways, either through vocational training or classes that help develop language skills or functional literacy skills. In Bangladesh, for example, we're working in an urban slum area where there's a lot of out-of-school girls because they have to stay at home to take care of the younger children. And so we're just starting a community drop-in center where we're going to start with recreational arts types activities and then slowly try to determine what the best method is for either getting them into school or providing accelerated learning centers or some place where they can at least get their primary certificate. So there's, depending on the context, there's a lot of different things that we try to do, but we do a lot of advocacy and just trying to, instill in communities and families and parents the importance of educating both children, not just boys.
You guys can ask questions about things beyond, just about doing development work and things like that, and you are welcome to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Would you have your hand up?
I was interested in knowing you were talking about Pakistan and Bangladesh, and both of these countries have a very strong system of shadow education and coaching classes that they need. So has there any studies being done whether going through this program they don't require them there? I know that you said
Yeah.
studies are different.
Yeah.
But
That's a great question. It's not something that we've investigated. We do hear in some of our home survey questionnaires that children are going to tuition centers or catch-up centers or in Bangladesh and Pakistan. So I think it's such a part of that society. It's such a norm, I feel like even if kids were doing, and I know kids who do really, really well and they still go to coaching centers, so it's just a cultural thing. But I think that's a great question to ask. Is the intervention helping so much that parents don't have to spend money, what little money they have on tuition or coaching centers? Yeah, good question.
I'm very interested in language and how in some of these particular places where there's so many different, there's multilingual societies, and you mentioned that if there, that you have a diagnostic test in the language spoken in the mother tongue or the language spoken at home,
Mm-hmm.
but and then how does that translate? Like once you have the test and then you have all these kids in the classroom from different backgrounds and who speak different languages at home, like what language do they speak in the classroom? And you mentioned briefly like, oh, the kids who speak Farsi like perform better. We have some ideas as to why, but like I think that's really fascinating, and I wonder if it has anything to do with the language itself, like the roots of the language, or how they acquire that language, and if that acquisition of the language is tied to numeracy in any way. I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah.
Can you just expand more on that?
One of the things that the team who was involved in this project, the Quetta team, thinks that perhaps Farsi in its similarity or stronger similarity to Urdu than Pashto or Bravi, perhaps that's something that children who speak Farsi have, not an ability, but it's easier for them because Urdu and Farsi are more similar. Other anecdotal information is that parents of that group are more supportive of the activities that were going on in that particular 18-school area. They really encourage children to attend the math camps. Children who spoke that language attended math camps more regularly than other children. The emphasis that the parents placed on the intervention, on schooling, on education, these are all anecdotal reasons that the team has. Is it fact? It's anecdotal. We need a lot more, I think, research into that one particular area, that group, to understand the reasons behind this. But at the policy level, and it stinks, it's the language of instruction that has to be used in the classroom. And we were just having another conversation about this. There is so much evidence out there that talks about using the child's home language to help them learn the language of instruction. So it's a fascinating topic. There's a woman named Helen Pinnock who has done a lot of research in Pakistan on this particular topic. So if you're interested, I can send Amina the study that she did and some of the the work that she's done with our offices in Bangladesh and a couple of other countries on the bridging idea and how do you use this concept of bridging home language to language of instruction to really help teachers understand how to help children who don't come from the language of instruction background. So yeah, it's a topic that needs a lot more work in. You know, there's a huge area to study there, and it's unfortunately very political. So.
I have a question about your organization because I think the material is really pretty.
On the what? Sorry, the
the
math materials. Yeah, and I have some over here. You mean these things? Yeah.
So compared to other organizations,
Uh-huh.
I think the most important things in your program and intervention.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's really important. We're working with kids, right? Kids want to be engaged. You can give kids sticks and stones and they're engaged, but if you have a little bit, a little bit of color in the classroom, it goes a really long way. And I'm very happy that we developed these storybooks. They've been just so exciting for children to read. The stories are just simple, basic stories about a kid whose family has a party and they invite 12 people, and every time, it's like that book that you might have heard it, When the Doorbell Rings, I think it's called, by Pat Hutchins. But every time the doorbell rings, one person comes in, the kid has to put an extra plate on the table, and he's counting plates. And by the end, there's 12 people, counted 12. So it's very simple stories, but the kids love them. So thank you for saying that. I will relay that back to our team. This is actually something that the Bangladesh team developed on their own. So, Numeracy Boost has... Really? So we have some materials that we not provide, but that we give our country offices as a template to say that these are the basic materials that we think you will need to implement this program. But if there's other things that you want to develop, go ahead. And Bangladesh is one of the most prolific countries in terms of development of their own materials. And so this is it's a simple two-spinner wheel. And you can do lots of different things with it. I don't read Bangladesh, I don't know what the numbers are, but you can put the two numbers together and add them and then spin the wheel to find the sum. You can do subtraction with it, you can do multiplication with it. It's multifunctional, multi-purpose. And this is something that kids in Bangladesh are familiar with. Probably not in the context that we support, but these are things that are in the market for some of our staff members' children that they've used, and so they developed it for the program that we support. I don't know if you guys saw this, but these are just, it's like they're cards that we don't even think twice about, but there are so many different math games that you can play with number cards, from matching to comparing to addition to subtraction to so many things. And it's a very, very easily available developed resource. We have a team in DC who put together the toolkit with the types of materials. So number card set, popsicle sticks, dice, geometric shapes. And then the countries have either procured these materials in their country or had a company make them for them. And then they develop additional ones like that wheel if they find that that's something that their kids would enjoy playing.
We just did this in class 2 weeks ago. I gave like a bag of socks, a bunch of rocks, and told them to create lesson activities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really fun. I think it also considered teachers implement these things, right? Because,
Exactly.
Obviously, children like materials,
Right.
but I can imagine that if you give teachers nice materials,
Right.
they're gonna be more likely to implement it than if you say, you know what,
Just
do
go
whatever you
Yeah.
can.
But in Malawi, actually, part of our training session was on, let's go outside and find materials that we can use to teach math. And so we found leaves, and we found stones, and we found sticks, and we found other things to show them that you don't need to have a fancy set of cards. You can make cards out of paper. You can do a lot with very little resources. So a lot of it is just helping them think about what you can do.
Daryl had his hand way up.
I don't know, maybe there'll be a little bit of pushback on this since you just said you want people to use local materials, what have you. But I was a teacher at Chanafel, and clearly limited resources in my village, what have you. But what we did, because we wanted our teachers to pretty much own their own educational development in the village. So what we did is we trained these teachers, local teachers and administrators, to write grants, to get micro grants, so they could fund their own materials for class. Is that something put in place with your organization? situation where you train local teachers and administrators to maybe write and tap some of the resources locally so it can be more sustainable.
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing a lot more of that in USAID grants. They will have like an innovation section, or they'll have a windows of opportunity section where they say X thousand amounts of dollars needs to be set aside for you in your program to give to schools to write grants or to develop their own school management plan for what they want improved in their school. And you will disperse that money based on applications that you receive. So
From the local pool of teachers that you...
Exactly, from the schools that you work in. It's a little artificial in that they're not sending a grant out into the world. They're sending it back to you, and you will give them the money because you're helping to develop that. But it really puts ownership on them to look at what in my school has a gap that I want to fix. Is it materials? Is it books? Is it chairs? Is it desks? Is it extra training for teachers? And they come up with the plan. They write it. We help them with the training on writing the plan and things like that. And then if we approve them, which we generally do, we give them the money. But I think that's important because that's what we're trying to develop, is that accountability, the sustainability aspect.
Yeah, kind of related to that question. So I see a lot of these great programs, especially in the Lutfeali's context, are limited to Quetta, and they're limited to a lot of the times. A lot of agencies are doing a lot in the refugee population area or in the refugee camps, and they're not really going outside Quetta or outside, even within Quetta, outside the refugee schools. So what kind of efforts, if you are at all, or if you can, make to make these programs more scalable and collaborate with the provincial government to have all these great things in other schools as well, outside Quetta and outside refugee schools?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And I feel like I'm a huge advocate of technology, and I think in this particular project in KP province, where we partnered with Teletalim, I think that their model is one of the first models that I've seen that could be scaled. In a place like Pakistan where there are security issues or political instability, because it doesn't require, in terms of content, a lot. They need a bus with satellite hookup, and then that bus can be driven to different locations, and teachers come together to one area, and training is delivered remotely. So I think that the use of technology, I feel like we need to get a lot more deliberate about the type of technology that we're choosing and the places that we choose to implement it in. We're working hopefully to partner with Teletalim to use their distance mechanism in refugee camps now in Iraq and Lebanon, I believe. I'm not sure of the exact locations, but I think that technology needs to be leveraged for locations that are hard to get to. And it's especially great that it's a homegrown company. It's not somebody coming from the outside. I think there's a lot more buy-in from community when the technology and the organization is local. And this organization has been very impressive in my opinion in the work that they've been able to do in the areas they've done it.
We have 5 more minutes, so any more questions? Yeah. I don't know, Abby, if that's a hand. Okay, Lisa, is that a hand?
Yes.
Okay, go for it. Shia.
So my question is more about your presentation, but just about your personal experiences. So I don't know if you've worked in other organizations apart from Save the Children, but if you could please speak to some of the experiences you've had during this work, and what were some of your highlights and some of the things that, like basically advice for us, because most of us are interested in
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the highlights of my experience has been working in Tajikistan. And I think especially for people who are just starting out, I think having an in-country experience beyond, assisting on a project for a short period of time, actually living in the country, working with people in that office, going out into the field to see what happened to that program that you designed so beautifully on paper, talking to people, interacting, that has been hands down the best experience that I've had. So I think that if you have the ability or the opportunity, especially if you're unattached, don't have kids, don't have family, don't have other burdens that might impede you from doing this, spending time. Okay, delete that part. Other obligations, not burdens, I should say. I'll take that word out. I love my daughter and my husband. I think it's an amazing experience to live in a country and to really see the work that you've been thinking about in your mind or reading about in papers or looking at in presentations. I think it gives you a very different perspective when you come back and you bring that perspective with you wherever you go and whatever work that you do. The other experience for me that has been profound has been working with Save the Children. I was telling the group earlier that I had lunch with. I think, there's a lot of places that you can go and find work at after you graduate, and I think you have an amazing program here, and you're going to get some good international experience with your internship, so you will hopefully be very marketable. But be deliberate in the place that you choose. Places are different. Save the Children is, I wouldn't choose to work in another organization. So I think that where you work really impacts how you feel about the work that you do. I have colleagues who are not very happy about the work that they do at other places, and I think it depends on where you are. And you know yourself best and the environment that you'll thrive in and the kind of work that you want to do. So I think just be deliberate, be choosy. And I think, if you have a solid background in the field with experience, I think that you will, find hopefully what you're looking for.
I do have two questions. One is, you mentioned a lot of positives of working with both AKS and Save the Children. What were some of the challenges that you faced in both organizations? And also, this is a second question that's kind of related, not really. But so I guess, how do you strike a balance between your own personal beliefs on what needs to be done versus what you're actually able to do?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on that as well?
Such good questions. Gosh, I could talk about that for a long time. I think so. One of the challenges, just from the position that I'm in right now, I'm a technical advisor. So I, advise on projects that I'm working with. I don't get to spend as much time there as I'd like to. I travel to those countries twice a year. I have, follow up over email, over Skype. It's hard. It's hard to keep up with what's happening. It's hard to get information back at times. It depends on the project. And so when you have limited engagement with a program, it just becomes harder to find out what's happening, to advocate for what you think should happen. You're not really there. Can you really say that? We have very good relationships with our country office teams. We have excellent staff. We have people who really collaborate well, and we're all kind of on the same page. We drink the same Kool-Aid, so it helps. But it is a challenge. It is a little bit of a limitation to not be in that country and working in Bangladesh all the time. But that's just the nature of this role, and I wanted to move back to the States, so I'm not going to complain about it. But it's a limitation of this particular type of job. I think the other challenge has been, kind of what you're talking about, where the government or the host organization does not see the project that you want to implement in the same way. And I think that I think there's a lot of reasons to that, but I feel like, you really have to work very hard from the very beginning of the design of the project to have that government buy-in, engagement, either the person on your working team or a lot of talk and discussion from the very get-go with the people who are the decision makers, because they are ultimately the ones who are going to implement that curriculum or not. I think there's always a middle ground. So trying to find what that middle ground is, maybe trying to get them to articulate more what their fears are about implementing what you're trying to say, and maybe seeing the perspective from their side and why they're wanting to do what they're wanting to do, and finding a middle ground. There's always compromise that benefits both sides. I think being respectful and open-minded is very important, and I know that all of you are. But I see a lot where somebody comes in from the US, from DC, from home office, and kind of says, this is the way it should be because I'm from America, that's how we do it over here. And right. So I think that's, you don't see that a lot, but you do see that. And I think we have to be very respectful of the countries that we work in. Who am I to go into Bangladesh and say you should do this way? They have educated, talented, very capable people in their countries. So I think having a very open dialogue, but being respectful and thinking about compromise, what's going to help them, what's going to help you, and keeping in mind the children at the end of the day and what's going to really help them. So that's what I want to say on that, I guess.
Matt, but you trained 5 minutes late, so.
Oh, okay.
So going off of your point, so we see a lot of that happening from the quote developed countries. Those ideas get transferred to developing. Based on your experience, what are some of the things that we could take from the countries you've worked in?
Yeah.
imported into the U.S.?
That's a great question. I was going to answer a slightly different question. I thought you were going in a slightly different direction, but I will try to answer your question. But one of the things that we're really at Save the Children focusing on is the south-to-south technical assistance. So we have a cadre of amazing in-country staff. So I support this team in Bangladesh who are amazing. So if Nepal needs a literacy boost training, why do I need to travel from Washington, D.C. to Nepal? I can send my colleague in Bangladesh, who is much closer, probably has a lot more relevant information to share about programmatic implementation, about culture, about context. So we're really trying to develop our field office staff and capability to go and provide technical assistance to neighboring countries. And that's something that we've been very deliberate about in the last couple of years, because we recognize that this model is not a sustainable model of me coming from DC to somewhere else. And also the regional collaboration and the experience sharing is priceless. So that's something that we've been working on. And I think that is what we can also bring here. So when we have events like CIES or when we have PLGs, we're holding a program learning group meeting in India at the end of April, and it's for all of our Asia region offices to come and share what's happening in their programs, to talk about some of the challenges, how they've addressed them, so that other programs can learn from their experience. So I think, I feel like that's one of the things that we do try to do, and we're cognizant of that, because we recognize that knowledge is everywhere and it's not just here. We try that even within programs. So in Pakistan, we have lots of literacy and numeracy programs, and we get people from the different programs together even to talk about things.
Okay, I think that's it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
I'm really fortunate to have you here. And
I just wanted to quickly mention that I have some briefers here on the numeracy boost results from Bangladesh and Pakistan. And
a policy brief, so
Oh.
it looks briefy like they're not talking about.
that's so funny. These are not policy briefs at all, but they'll give you a little flavor. And then this is a really wonderful document that we created that talks about literacy, the work that we do in literacy across Save the Children, with data from Ethiopia, data from Pakistan, data from all over, like very little bits of data, but it's just done in like infographic style. That's always so cool to read.